Harmony and Cordelia talk about Mitch. Cordelia actually seems worried about Mitch's well-being, and for a moment you think she cares. And then she reveals what she really cares about is how Mitch will make her look bad with his ugly injuries. Harmony assures her that the prom photos can be photoshopped.
Oh gosh, she's the worst.
We don't see her, of course, but Marcy is also standing there with them. The discussion triggers a flashback to a non-specific time before Welcome to the Hellmouth, where Cordelia and Harmony gossip about Mitch, and Marcy tries to join the conversation, but they both reject her. In the present, Buffy shows up to talk to Cordelia about Mitch, prompting them to reject her in a way that mirrors the flashback. When Harmony starts ranting about Buffy, Marcy pushes her down the stairs, injuring her ankle.
That's not nice.
Harmony says someone pushed her, so Buffy investigates. She hears Marcy giggling and sees a door close. Buffy follows and accidentally bumps into her. She tries to talk to her, but Marcy avoids her and doesn't say anything, and Buffy eventually gives up. At this time, two mysterious men in black suits start hanging around the school. I believe they are supposed to be the Men in Black, characters from UFO folklore, rather hilariously misappropriated for a show that has nothing to do with aliens. Mostly.
And he said, well, they were, he goes, I don't know how to describe them except for extremely odd looking. They were the exact same height, they were wearing the exact same clothes, and they had the exact same faces, like they were twins.
The concept of the Men in Black stems from the idea that UFO conspiracy theorists can acquire valuable information about the existence of alien life on Earth that must be silenced to keep the world ignorant of the alien danger that is present. Though they pretend to be government agents, the Men in Black are aliens in disguise, or some other form of supernatural character. And all of their identifying characteristics cannot be linked to any actual people, because they are fake people with superhuman qualities. The idea that the Men in Black are actually government agents from a division that is so secret that their identities are erased from all records is a fairly recent development in the legend that was popularized with the movie Men in Black. Incidentally, the movie Men in Black would have been released a couple months after this aired, so I imagine there was some interest in featuring Men in Black characters to participate in this writing trend. These Men in Black characters are not aliens, just mysterious government agents, and as we'll see, they have very little in common with the characters in the movie, not to mention anything else in the series, even the Initiative.
That's weird.
Buffy confirms with Giles that touching a ghost feels very different than what she experienced, and determines that Marcy is just an invisible girl. The Scoobies don't realize that she is permanently invisible, and think that she's just a student with a superpower, which makes sense, given that their experience is of Buffy, a girl who happens to have Slayer powers.
It's cool, Buffy's a superhero.
And of Catherine and Amy's body, a girl who happens to be a witch. Xander says that he wants this superpower himself.
Well, if you close your eyes and wish real hard.
Xander, where did you go?
Of course, Xander being the creepy dude he is, he suggests wanting to use this superpower to perv on women in the locker room. That's the same disrespectful, intrusive behavior he demonstrates in Season 1, Episode 5, Never Kill a Boy on the First Date, when he tries to spy on Buffy when she changes her clothes. It's not a cute flaw, it's awful entitled behavior. Ironically, it's the same thing done by Marcy when she's obviously creepy as the villain. The whole fantasy of wanting to be invisible in order to intrude past barriers and ogle women is later critically examined in Season 6, Episode 11, Gone, and is thematically condemned in Season 6, Episode 13, Dead Things, as a part of rape culture. The Scoobies figure out that Marcy is going after Cordelia's friends. Buffy tells Willow to restrict her list to only include missing kids. Giles will research how to make someone invisible visible, and Buffy will investigate Cordelia. While Buffy watches Cordelia from the shadows, admiring her May Queen outfit and wishing she were back in that role, Joss fakes us out by making us think that Marcy's attacking Giles, but it's only Angel. Yay, Angel's back! We haven't seen him since Season 1, Episode 7, Angel. At this point in the series, Angel being a good vampire is still a novelty, so there's an emphasis on how vampiric he is. He casts no reflection, sticks to the shadows, and moves very deliberately.
Like a cat.
Giles marvels at the fact that he's talking to a vampire who won't try to eat him. There's a strong element of vampire romanticism. likely derivative of Anne Rice.
I fought more than a couple pimply, overweight vamps that called themselves Lestat.
This is before the events of Season 2, so Giles has no grudge against him yet. Giles, who has researched vampires for years, has a fascination with Angel and deals with him rather shyly. It's adorable. I really like the idea of these two as friends. I can see why people would ship them. They've got kind of a web series Carmilla and Laura thing going on. They'll also both eventually be coded as bisexual.
Angel and me have never been intimate. Except that one.
So technically it is plausible, yeah. Angel, unfortunately, is not there for smoochies. He's there to talk about Buffy's upcoming confrontation with the Master. There's some big prophesized event coming, something involving the Anointed One, for which the Order of Aurelius has been preparing. Angel is worried about Buffy, and wants to compare notes with Giles. Giles laments missing important books on the subject, but Angel knows where he can find one of them and promises that he'll get it for him. Giles talks about his current case and suggests that it would be great to have the power of invisibility. Angel doesn't think so because he's a vampire. He can't see his face and thinks it's horrible. This creates an interesting parallel between him and Marcy. In a way, she's like a vampire in that she has had her humanity taken from her, and she became a monster. We cut to one of Marcy's flashbacks of looking at her reflection, the way she and Angel can no longer. Because we didn't explicitly see Angel leave, we technically don't know for sure that he and Giles didn't make out in the library. Yeah, I'm suddenly a Giles-Angel shipper. What's that called? Jangel?
Bloody hell. Get on with it then.
Right. Well, anyway. Cordelia and the Cordettes have a conversation right where Marcy is, but completely ignore her. She tries to join in, but they act like she doesn't exist, or at least shouldn't exist. For all they seem to care, she could just go die off screen.
Or it could turn her into Carrie at the prom.
In the present, Cordelia gives a May Queen acceptance speech about how wonderful she is. The audience dislike of her grows. Off to the side, the Scoobies meet and discuss their findings. Buffy looks over Willow's list and identifies Marcy Ross as a candidate, because Marcy liked band, and the invisible girl was last observed in the band room.
Oh, and this one time at band camp?
She investigates and discovers an attic where Marcy has been living. She finds Marcy Ross's yearbook and confirms that it's her. Marcy watches and considers stamping Buffy, but reconsiders. Buffy takes the yearbook and leaves. Instead, Marcy goes after the teacher who showed Cordelia a favor. Cordelia comes in and saves her at the last moment. Marcy lets them go, but ominously writes "Listen" on the chalkboard. This might be a reference to the 1988 book Matilda by Roald Dahl and its 1996 film adaptation, which are thematically similar to Carrie, but for a younger audience and with a happy ending. In Matilda, the telekinetic girl Matilda uses her power to write on a chalkboard to scare the evil school principal by pretending to be the vengeful ghost of the principal's father, implied to be her murder victim. Notably, the film would have come out around the time that this episode was being written.
What is this? All work and no play make Doris a dull girl?
Buffy shows the yearbook to her friends, pointing out the page where everyone wrote, "Have a nice summer," indicating that no one was friends with her and had nothing substantial to say to her. Xander and Willow claim that they never knew her, but Buffy points out that they both wrote, "Have a nice summer." Willow looks at the list and realizes that she and Xander had 3 classes with her the previous year and never noticed her. I think this is a nice touch. Xander and Willow aren't just the good kids to contrast with the Cordettes as the bad kids. They were equally affected by the high school social toxicity and were complicit in ignoring Marcy. The reveal of the page containing many "Have a nice summer" messages is done in an interesting way. Despite the unorthodoxy of the content, it's presented as straightforward horror, in a manner evocative of The Shining's "all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy" manuscript reveal. This could very easily have been especially campy or a parody of horror because it doesn't look like a typical horror scene. Instead, Reza Badi very respectfully presents a scenario native to the high school environment as appropriately awful. Now that the show is looking into Willow and Xander's past, the character Jesse becomes curiously absent. When we were introduced to him in Welcome to the Hellmouth, we were given the distinct impression that he was a friend with Willow and Xander for years and years. Logically, he should at least be mentioned as having had classes with Marcy too, but it's like Joss forgot about him, and maybe he did. Jesse was absent from the original Buffy pilot and apparently split off of Xander. In Welcome to the Hellmouth and The Harvest, Jesse fulfills the role of a dude in distress, a villain for Xander to face, and is a means for Joss to troll the audience with an apparently major character who gets killed off very quickly. He's not strictly necessary for the show, and the show soon forgets about him. Because he doesn't get mentioned even in an episode where it makes sense to mention him, the fans too forget about him, and he mostly doesn't even show up in pre-series fanfic. Ironically, this is very similar to what happened with Marcy Ross. Joss better watch out. He might have an invisible vampire coming after him. Buffy and Xander make the connection between Marcy's being treated as invisible and literally becoming invisible. Giles figures out that it's not a mystical problem at all. It's science. It's the observer effect in quantum physics affecting Marcy on a macroscopic level.
Hey, did you get that physics class you wanted?
As can be expected whenever a show invokes quantum physics, these are extremely misapplied scientific concepts. Most notably, what happens in micro stays in micro. You can't just run through walls because subatomic particles do it.
Magic works off physics.
Giles says that the physics are helped along by the proximity to the Hellmouth, which is a handwave plot device often used in the show. The Hellmouth is responsible for just about everything, even things that have nothing to do with hell. However, the end of the episode brings Giles' assumption into question, as it seems like invisible students are not an isolated occurrence. Season 7, Episode 16, Storyteller, shows the phenomenon happening again as a direct consequence of Hellmouth activity, but Storyteller is far enough removed from Out of Mind, Out of Sight that this may be a retcon.
Retroactive.
I believe that Out of Mind, Out of Sight is the earliest purely science fiction episode. I, Robot You, Jane flirts with the science fiction, but it is still fundamentally about Moloch and magic. Out of Mind, Out of Sight has supernatural characters Buffy and Angel in it, but the episode focuses on Marcy, who is fundamentally grounded in science fiction, and it also features the Men in Black from UFO folklore. That's pretty weird because this isn't a science fiction show, it's a fantasy show. Giles and Angel both comment that invisible people aren't in their area of expertise. That makes sense, she's foreign to this environment. Buffy ends up using her supernatural powers and duties in order to defend the school from a character from another genre.
I don't believe in science. All those bits in molecules no one's ever seen.
Future uses of science fiction weave it into the themes of the show much better.
Quantum physics makes me nauseous.
The Invisible Man is a self-contained science fiction story. Written at a time when scientists were abusing animals with hideous experiments, its titular Invisible Man is an archetypal mad scientist who tortures a neighbor's cat and turns himself invisible to get away with it. His means of transformation are based in chemistry, where he comes up with a series of potions to alter the colors of his various body parts. And, okay, so here's the thing. His idea is to turn himself entirely white. And from there, it's only a small step to transparency, where he looks like a glass statue. And from there, it's only a small step to total invisibility. I'm sure that's how it works. And his first step is focusing on turning the pigments in his blood from red to white. So he's affecting the iron in his blood to change it from red to white. I'm pretty sure that would kill him. And white is not the same as transparent. White is a color. Even if you could affect the color of all your various body parts, you couldn't turn them invisible. He puts on a disguise as an accident victim covered in bandages and gets a room at an inn to continue his research, ends up using his invisibility to steal money to pay rent, and then becomes so corrupt that he wants to take over the world. I'm pretty sure a fair number of pulp stories about evil scientists owe some inspiration to this guy.
Never a fetching mad scientist about when you need one.
Even though Out of Mind, Out of Sight retells Carrie, it draws a significant chunk of the story from The Invisible Man and inherits the science fiction nature of it. Marcy isn't an evil scientist, but she's an evil product of science. Reza Badi did a very good job on the episode's tone, so it doesn't feel that off, but it actually is very strange to position Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the science fiction realm. It almost feels like it's a crossover with the X-Files.
I cannot believe that you, of all people, are trying to scully me.
Buffy points out evidence that Marcy is targeting Cordelia, and Cordelia overhears her as she comes in. Cordelia doesn't use her brain very much, but she does have intelligence to draw from, so she already has an idea that she's being targeted. She understands that Buffy has physical strength and the ability to help people, and she approaches Buffy to beg her for help, and still manages to repeatedly insult her in the process.
I was kind of hoping you were in a gang.
Yeah, for the Slayers.
The Scoobies fill her in. Cordelia acts completely disrespectful, arrogant, and repellent, referring to Marcy as an it to simply be killed, and insulting everyone in sight, and out of sight. She has a good point that she isn't as evil as Marcy, and the Scoobies agree that they have a responsibility to protect her, but they find her bothersome to be around.
Very irritating.
We see Marcy suffer in the flashbacks, and we appreciate her position as a victim of the harshness of high school, as well as Cordelia's hateful behavior, so we're sympathetic to her as the plotting attacker, like, Sherlock. We've seen Cordelia act horribly to Buffy, our beloved protagonist, and the episode has been steadily increasing our hate for this girl. Even when she's begging for help, she's insufferable. Now that Cordelia is dependent on the Scoobies, they have some ability to make her pay, with Xander openly insulting her, and Buffy suggesting to Cordelia's dismay that they use Cordelia as bait. And this causes audience schadenfreude, that is, happiness at others' suffering, to release tensions. We love to hate Cordelia, and we love to see the victims of her verbal abuse get to pay her back some suffering. To an extent, we are now aligned with Marcy's interests. In the flashback where Marcy vanishes from sight, she does so in the middle of class, ironically where everyone should notice her. She keeps trying to contribute to the class discussion, but the teacher would prefer to call on Willow, Xander, or Cordelia. The discussion in question is on the roles of characters in fiction, specifically with regard to an unnamed story where the main character is also the villain. Willow identifies the role of a villainous main character as a protagonist, but the teacher suggests that the character is both protagonist and antagonist. This is applicable to the character of Marcy in the episode. She is the main subject of the episode and the protagonist of these flashback segments, if not the protagonist of the episode as a whole, and she is both a sympathetic victim and a hated villain. Cordelia goes about her business with Buffy along as her bodyguard. Alone with Buffy and made vulnerable by her circumstances, Cordelia is able to let go of her stance of superiority and relate to Buffy as someone on her level. They have a lot in common, as evidenced by their initial friendship in Welcome to Hellmouth. And Cordelia is able to open up and talk about Marcy like a human being. Having heard what happened to Marcy, she is able to show some actual empathy and feel bad for the girl. Even if she's not yet at the point of accepting responsibility for her part in Marcy's suffering, this already shows some growth from her dismissal of the bicyclist's pain. It's a subtle moment, and viewers would be forgiven for not catching it on the first watch.
You could catch it.
Buffy doesn't catch it. She still finds Cordelia annoying, and she dismisses Cordelia's ability to empathize with lonely people. Cordelia responds with anger, but it's not the petty cattiness that you would expect from her, and is instead an honest defensiveness of her character. She isn't a monster, she's just a girl in high school. She explains that even though she finds value in maintaining social dominance and popularity, she knows that her posse doesn't really like her, that they're just trying to attain popularity themselves, and she is ultimately alone in her circle of supposed friends. She is an extremely lonely person, and as such functions as a doppelganger of Marcy, demonstrating the other side of what extreme high school loneliness can do to a person. She fights bitterly to maintain social dominance because that gets her something out of the awful high school experience. And it's better to have that than nothing at all. Cordelia isn't the one to hate. It's high school that's the real problem. With this scene, Out of Mind, Out of Sight crafts a powerful bridge of empathy. We now care about Cordelia as this real, genuine, vulnerable person. Yeah, she's done bad things, but she's still a person to be cared about. And what were you doing last scene laughing at her suffering? You monster. The episode is very carefully paced to make the viewers complicit in high school antagonism, even as they recognize that it is to be opposed. By showing the perspectives of Buffy and Marcy as Cordelia behaves badly towards them, Cordelia is framed as a pure high school bully to be despised. But this is only a fraction of who she is as a person. Viewers were positioned as antagonistic to her based on an incomplete picture of who she really is, thereby acting as antagonistic people do in high school and being part of the problem. When the empathy bridge is established, there is a jarring recognition of the previous antagonistic view of Cordelia being woefully inadequate. This past antagonism is given specific focus in the episode itself, but it is also present in past episodes such as Nightmares, leading us to laugh at illusions of Cordelia getting a bad hair day and becoming unpopular. I maintain that the schadenfreude isn't problematic then and there because of what we know of Cordelia at the time and how it plays into Willow's empowerment arc. But while we're on the subject...
You're lesbians, so the hating of men will come in handy.
Why in the world are these moments of schadenfreude used as evidence of Joss Whedon's supposed misogyny? The thinking seems to be that Joss wrote mean-spirited humor targeting a character later respected as a decent female character, so Joss gets off on disrespecting good female characters and wants you to, too. But that just doesn't make any sense at all. Joss wrote Out of Mind, Out of Sight, as well as being showrunner for the whole show. It's not like the episode that makes you respect Cordelia is written by a woman in defiance of Joss's characterization of her, and all Joss does is degrade the character that this wonderful female writer created. It's all Joss. It's all Joss's pacing and plotting. It's possible that the people who criticize these moments in other episodes do so without having seen Out of Mind, Out of Sight. Perhaps they've seen a few Angel episodes where Cordelia is at the height of her characterization, and then they see her earlier characterization and take things out of context. This could account for some of it. However, I often see Out of Mind, Out of Sight being praised at the same time for its excellent scene of establishing empathy with Cordelia. It really did move a lot of people. Either they watched Out of Mind, Out of Sight without seeing that important writing credit and just assumed it was written by a woman because only a woman could respect a woman, or they committed the critic's most deadly sin of watching passively and not actively, and then tried to write critical commentary based on their emotions. If they were actively trying to analyze the episode, as they should have been if they were writing critical commentary, they should have been able to see the very deliberate pacing, leading viewers to progressively hate Cordelia for very specific plot reasons, until it reaches its climax and is broken by the empathy bridge. The fact that so many feminist critics miss this and then label Joss an evil misogynist points to extraordinarily bad critical analysis exacerbated by an anti-male bias. This is far from an isolated incident, and nearly all of the Dollhouse backlash can be compared to this. Joss very deliberately plots Dollhouse to make the viewer complicit in the abuses of the Rossum Corporation by liking villain protagonists and ogling sex slaves, and then this is just seen as Joss being a creepy perv, despite the overall empowerment arc, the emphasis of empathy, and the ultimate condemnation of Rossum.
I told you Rossum was evil.